It has been several years since I've been able to come visit your chapter. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this event, and I'm looking forward to questions and hearing more about how things have been. The talk that I was asked to give is called Data Literacy for Knowledge Workers, and for those of you who don't know me, I'll begin by introducing myself briefly. I'm quite old. I go back to the old days with punch cards and things along those lines. Had a number of associations, most particularly in the longest term since 1993 is with Virginia Commonwealth University, where I'm an associate professor of information systems. I also have an appointment at the Institute for Defense Analyses. I'm the president of DAMA International. I'm the associate director of the MIT CDO Society, and I have a company that I work with called Anything Awesome. If I have a claim to fame, I've experienced with a wide variety on a number of places with data management practices worldwide. And the idea around this is that in addition to my work in the classroom with wonderful students that we have at VCU, I've also been able to go spend time with various groups. Again, 4 years with Nokia, 5 years with Deutsche Bank, 3 years with Wells Fargo, 3 years with Walmart, and I'm currently working through an appointment, an immersion with HUD. In the process, I've been able to write a number of articles and books that some have found helpful to do this. In fact, I would be remiss, however, if I didn't start out by saying that as a topic, data is complex and detailed, and outsiders really do not want to hear about or discuss any of the specific challenges around it. Most are unqualified and don't have the requisite engineering and architecture background. Therefore, first of all, is taught inconsistently with a primary focus on technology with a dramatic lack of understanding on the part of the students of the business impact as they come out of these types of programs. The resulting situation is that data is not well understood and has to be really relearned by every work group in the organization. And I want you to think about the magnitude of that as we go through the rest of this talk. This lack of standards creates a whole series of unknown dependencies, and I think the best way to illustrate that is with a wonderful little video here that I'm giving you the YouTube link off to the left, of course. But this is a fellow named Wally Easton, and Wally is quite... No, yay for Wally. But on the other hand, imagine how much lost productivity exists in each and every one of our organizations because all of our knowledge workers have been similarly creative learning about data. And while Wally did a neat job if his goal was creativity and entertainment, he probably didn't do a good job if his goal was efficiency. And so consequently, there's a big piece missing here where all of our knowledge workers have learned about data different ways. They approach the elephant from different directions. It's a very, very imprecise and an uneven situation. And we need to rectify this, not just within the traditional places data has been, but all through society, because of course it is always going to be true that there will never be any less data than exactly right now at this moment. And if I wait 5 seconds and say it again, there will never be any less data than also right now. There's no other resource in the world that is expanding at this rate, and quite frankly, we are not even close as far as keeping up with the demand on this, much less whether it's the right kinds of resources that we've pulled together. There's a couple of statistics there, but it's really just enough to say that there are many, many more demand for data analysis than there are people able to produce it in good quality here. So this led to the talk, which is to say I can remember a book back. Now I was not quite this old. I was born in 1959. This book was around a bit after that, but not in time for me to have read it. Nevertheless, you could see the question was why Johnny can't read and what you can do about it. This was the failure in our schools, which has been truly a perennial challenge, at least through my lifetime, understanding it, and of course my career as a teacher. Uh, Another book that came out very similar to that, Why Johnny Still Can't Read, a new look at the scandal of our schools. Then a third one, the real reason why Johnny still can't read. And finally, why Johnny can't read, write, or do arithmetic, even with a college degree. An account of the fraud in higher education by somebody called Professor Doom. Well, these are interesting topics here, but let's get back to ours, which is really why Johnny can't data and what we can do about it. So here we go with the content overview. First part I'll spend talking about 21st century citizenry. Then in part two, I'll present part of the framework that we've developed for data literacy. And I should mention at this point, this is material developed in conjunction with my colleague Todd Harbour, who's been my writing partner on my last three books. Part three, we talk a little bit about improving the workforce and give you some cases and things along those lines on this. So let's dive in and start talking about building a 21st century. And I'm going to start off with an example that has to do with sports and Nike, of which I have no association here.
When Zion Williamson's Nike sneaker busted open on the court less than a minute into Duke's Wednesday night game, the star forward went down hard. And so did Nike. The company's stock sliding on the news, closing the day down nearly a point, losing an estimated $1 billion in value.
So here we have a situation where a very proud brand name company suddenly has a quality problem. And I don't care what kind of problem you have in business, it has a data root cause. So of course this very quickly turned into, I'm sure for them, a data quality problem. And what they discovered is a journey very similar to other organizations where they think they need this much data. You can see I've drawn a little yellow circle around the tangled root of the data maze that we have in this particular organization. But as you start to pull on these things, you discover that it's not just those sources, that you have to go back further into the data to find the true cause. And in fact, very quickly, in almost all instances that I've been involved in, you go even further still, which is to go to some external data that you don't, in fact, depend all 100% on your own data, and in the process discovering really what you don't know about your own data, which is always a sort of frightening prospect in order to look at, and it's not necessarily a great situation for organizations to find them in. So just trying to assemble this information in response is much worse than taking a proactive approach. You know, you've already been hit, everybody's reeling, and now they're looking like they have to respond, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. It's very difficult to learn about what happened, what went wrong when you are responding to a crisis in this. It's uncomfortable being dependent on data that is controlled by others, and organizations are, again, learning lessons sort of the hard way here. And finally, there is a very large disconnect between classroom and data slash statistical skills needed beyond the classroom in order to do this. And to sort of start us down our journey towards defining the concept of data literacy, I'm going to start out here with a country music story. Now, this is a pair of country music stars called the Louvin brothers. They are pictured here on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. And when they became famous, as most stars do, they bought things called a nudie suit. Now, a nudie suit is the fancy suits that you see the country stars wearing. And interestingly here, Charlie Louvin, who's the gentleman on the right here with the guitar, says in his book a very nice quote that I believe demonstrated his financial literacy. So he said, nudie suits, of course, they're deductible. Somebody had said to him, Charlie, now that you're rich, you can deduct your nudie suits from your taxes. And he says, of course they're deductible, but before you can deduct them from your taxes, you have to deduct them from your income. And again, just a wonderful, insightful piece of knowing how financially literate this was. Now, that's to say the financial industry has in fact done quite well and developed several types of measures of financial literacy. They don't have a standard yet, but they're certainly closer than other types of industries. And you can see here an example of three that are just, somebody says if you put $100 in savings and your interest rate was 2% a year, after 5 years, how much would you have in the account if you let your money grow? And you get the answer on this. Notice they have a refuse to answer category too, which is interesting, but I don't know which way that counts if you do that. So people have been making steps towards financial literacy. Here's another one on health literacy. Again, one of the things we're fortunate in the United States to have is standardization of food content labels. And you're seeing here a standard use of data standards, very, very useful to the United States. And people are able to take and develop specifications around health literacy and say, if you read the literacy label on the left, the content, food content label on the left, can you answer these questions? If you ate the entire container, how many calories would you have? Well, let's see. Nutrition size is half a cup, 4 containers per calorie. Yes, again, you should be able to get these. Some of these obviously are tongue in cheek, but they can be developed to the point where you have an objective measure. And there are lots of literacies. Again, we've talked about financial, there's cultural, media, scientific, information, critical. Again, go into the academy, excuse me, you will find lots of these all over the place. I want to stop on this last one here, though, which is illiteracy as a concept, and just sort of speak to this, which is the idea that it's not only the inability to do the mechanics, the reading in the case of literacy, but also the lack of knowledge of the subject that enters into this as well. And that's an important component as we go forward and define our literacy. Are there existing measures is a good question to ask as you're looking at these things. And this is something that the U.S. government has done. It was originally called the National Assessment of American Adult Literacy. Now it's called the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. So old or new data going to be in these types of labels here. But overall, they've addressed and assessed three separate concepts: literacy as a textual construct, numeracy in this case, and digital problem solving. And the thing I want to point out to you that should scare us all collectively as a society is that these numbers are unchanged during the years of big data, 2012 to 2017. Oh my goodness, this is not good. If these are not moving, this represents, of course, no statistical significant variances, much less any progress on societal parts. So this is a challenge for us society-wise. The most common definition out there, of course, is the Wikipedia definition. That just means the one people have stopped arguing over. I guess, first of all, let's add this piece too. There's a comment out there, at least as of today, which is 19 August 2022. It's a suggestion that the article on data literacy be merged with information literacy. I'm pretty sure that community would disagree. I do understand that ours would as well, but nevertheless, it hasn't happened and people aren't arguing about it at the moment as far as I can tell. So the definition that people use is data literacy is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data. And what you'll see as a result of this little talk here is that we generally don't have those levels at high levels in our knowledge worker base, much less in our management. These are challenges all the way around. This is, of course, a broad challenge. If we want everybody to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data, it could be just a simple thing of making change, which seems to have been less and less in terms of a rigorous requirement these days for societal use, to actually doing a job that is based around digital analysis. The concept is literacy focuses on competencies working with data, which means you have a wide degree of variability. And it's not really similar in the ability to read text because there is understanding and you have to read in order to understand. So this also then says we can't set this as a binary condition. So before we go forward and again define, let's look at some other words that are relative to this just to see what's happening in here. I like words that are important. I believe most data people that way agree with me. Again, data literacy or literate is the ability to read and write or having knowledge or skill in a specified field. For example, you might say you're a computer literate, in which case would we say we are data literate, right? Well, or data-rate, we could try that. Also notice it has a noun definition as well as a person and a learned person, which is a nice connotation on that. Proficient is a nice competency as well. We might say, is that perhaps a better requisite or a better understanding of our needs as a society as we look at this? Or even further, perhaps the word acumen. And I particularly like the British definition. You can see the last one on the page there, which is the ability to discern or judge well. And given the choice of three, I would certainly pick that as the correct answer, but I don't think we're going to get a lot of hits if we hashtag data acumen out there. That said, it's still worth, I believe, considering because society and every one of our measures shows we're doing a quite poor job of this. If we ask companies, are they competing on data and analytics? The majority say they are not. Are they managing data as a business asset? The majority say they are not. Are they creating a data-driven business? 1 in 4 is claiming that. And are they forging a data culture? Interesting thing, and I'll just shout out this particular survey from Randy Bean. He does a great job on this. There are years of data, longitudinal, that you can look at here at newvantage.com. And he's done a real service to the industry by standardizing this. And here's one of the questions that he's asked these thousands of organizations that he's worked with over the years. Are your problems primarily people or uh, technology problems? And the first year he did this was 2018. You can see there's 2019, 2020, 2021. The point is, largely, these are people and process problems. Now, the first thing that you should take away from this finding, which is quite solid and I believe quite represents the real world, is that this is the role, of course, of data governance. That this is why you have data governance around here, because if those people and process problems are not governed, whom is taking care of them? And the other part is to understand, of course, that we way overemphasize the role of technologies in this. They play a critical part, but you notice the problem areas are not in those particular areas. This represents, again, minimum of 80-20 rule here, saying that 80% of the data challenges are people and process placed. And we simply haven't been reacting to them, paying attention, and doing anything other than sort of lip service to that. I'm going to give you a couple of other falls into the 80-20 rule, unfortunately, categories here just to start us out and level set us. Everybody, of course, wants to do a better job with data analysis. They might look at this and say, well, some data preparation is inevitable. What should the actual number be? Should it be 50-50? Many people would say, gosh, that seems a lot, very high ratio on this. Remember, Apple's margins are in the 40% ratio, so maybe not too far off of this, but a good ratio might be that you do 80%, you put in $1 and you get 80 cents worth of data analysis and 20%, 20 cents worth of data preparation on here. Turns out the reality, and everybody knows this, is that the 80% rule is what rules all of this, that you spend far more time in data preparation and that you should shift that to a lower price point so that organizations can benefit. A good ratio seems to be 1 data engineer for every group of 9 or 10 data scientists, and that seems to be a very good way of adding to the process. Let's keep going with these ratios here for just a minute, just to sort of level set this. One of the important things in the data world is, of course, to separate the wheat from the chaff on this, which is to say that not all data is equal. And we can say that well-organized data is worth more. And in fact, look at this over time. Before the information age, there were still good examples of using metadata. Again, imagine instead of handing you a book, somebody handed you a bunch of pages that were sort of random. No, we've used this type of metadata, these data organizations, for years and years. Page numbering, alphabetizing, making sure that we can directly access certain types of information has become standard and clearly has more value than if we cut the spine off the back of the book, fling the pages to the group, and the knowledge, of course, becomes ephemeral quite rapidly in that process. What we really need to do is to understand that these poor data management practices, therefore, are costing organizations time and money and effort, and that 80% of the data in your organization is rot. Now, please don't think that I am insulting anybody out there by calling their data a bad word. ROT is an acronym. We love acronyms, as you all know, in this world, standing for data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And the only arguments I have had with people about the number 80% is that they try to talk me to believing that their organization, the ratio is much closer to 95% of their data being rot. Now, I think the most important thing is that they seem to know that they know, but it also does indicate that we have quite a lot of data tied up in unproductive ways. And if nothing else, if we took our cloud bills and got them down to 1/5 of what they are right now, people would set up and take notice right away. So the question becomes, again, which data should we eliminate or at least put in a place where it doesn't cost nearly what it seems to cost for everybody else along those ways. This is just one example of separating the wheat from the chaff, and more importantly, who is qualified to do this in your organization. We should probably maintain these skills in a fashion that supports the creation of a group of people who are getting good at this and practicing this activity, as opposed to having it happen random stance all around our organization with various work groups, each relearning the process over and over again, very much like Wally Easton throwing those pink balls down on the piano because he doesn't know that there's perhaps a better way to make music with a piano and entertain an audience for a livelihood. Let's take another look at sort of misperception of data. Again, it's our attempt to level set all the way around, and that is that data is the most important, underutilized, and poorly managed organizational data asset. It is the only organizational asset that is non-depletable, non-degrading, and durable in nature. This gives it the dubious category of beating out other data assets in the process of being valuable. And look at it compared to financial assets, real estate assets, inventory assets. These are definitely different in characteristic, and data as such needs to be considered very well. But many people start off with the wrong perspective on it, and it results in severe detours on their way to getting data value, thinking things like data is the new oil. Well, it's important to understand that thinking of data as oil would mean that you would take each data item in and process it quite a bit and produce some value out of it and use it exactly once. And of course, if you think about data's use, reuse is much more valuable in many organizations than is use of the data just once. And we also architect the delivery systems quite differently in a situation where we are delivering it for one use and then disposal as opposed to reuse. So these are just two significant differences there, why you should not think of data as a new oil. Well, if not, how should you think of it? And I like to say data is the new soil. Excuse me. There are two parts of data as the new soil that are important to think about. The first one is that you don't create a garden by flinging seeds randomly about the place. You instead carefully prepare the place where you're going to grow your data in this case. The second thing is to say that you also don't plant things on Monday and expect to feed a family on Friday. There's a time delay, a time difference, a time cadence difference that is very different from most of IT. That's a different talk, but we can chat about it perhaps at a question or two. If you need to sell data with a sizzle, that is absolutely necessary and correct and useful. But of course, be careful of what you use. I've gotten in trouble trying to sell bacon in certain parts of the world is the wrong kind of sizzle, as you might imagine in that. Data, back on track here, data does deserve its own strategy then by being this kind of unique asset. It deserves attention that is on par with the other assets of similar categories and that needs professional administration in order to make up for past neglect. And I want to give you just one example of this. It's a relatively recent one. In the fall of 2020, Forbes magazine, I believe, we'll see it pop up here in just a minute, Forbes magazine valued American Airlines as $6 billion. That's the weight of the number of shares that they had times the value of the shares. As you might remember, in the fall of 2020, most people were not flying. Consequently, the valuation was rather low for American Airlines. I'm sorry, yeah, that's right, American Airlines. But interestingly, the same valuation of American Airlines valued their data at between $20 million and $30 million. Now, both of those things cannot be true at the same time, and yet a similar valuation proposition around United Airlines existed as well. The company was valued at $9 billion, and the data in their Mileage Plus program was valued at $22 billion. I would argue that the untapped value in there that was clearly something the organizations wanted to access in order to continue managing the pandemic, as it was difficult for all organizations to do, shows the value of, the harm that data debt causes. If they were able to realize that full value, value of American Airlines should be the market value of all its stuff, the things they count, the $6 billion, plus the 20 to $30 billion of data value that they accumulate. But again, that's a different talk, different topic. Let's instead look at knowledge workers at the moment and start out with a concept that was introduced to us by Peter Drucker, a very famous management consultant. You can see the types of knowledge workers that are given with typical examples. The idea being one that uses their head for a living instead of their muscles for a living around that. And one of the things, of course, we'd like knowledge workers to do is sort of think about inputs based on data and then processing the data in a correct form. And that really does get to a data literacy component. If we could just improve their overall productivity by 10%, it would represent a tremendous wage increase for them, productivity increase for the organizations, and a very significant degree of leverage for most organizations looking at this. So let's take a look at some measures that we can look at in here. First one is that organizations are stressing their knowledge workers. 33% of the time, knowledge workers spend reworking or recreating knowledge that already exists. 10% of their time is spent creating new knowledge and content. Again, that's a very 1 in 10 ratio and a very sad one, but true. Interestingly, when asked, 53% would rather do household chores and 52% would rather pay bills than use a content management repository system provided by the organization. Not that they have a resistance to reusing work. They would love to spend less time recreating and reworking existing knowledge, but that the uses of these systems are so atrocious that they would actually get stressed, and that 74% report feeling overwhelmed or unhappy working with data, and at least 1/3 of them spent at least 1 hour per week procrastinating over data tasks. Just imagine if I was going to procrastinate with this talk and I stopped talking for an hour. That would not obviously be good. So let's press on here and look at some more statistics. One of the things that has happened is that organizations try to give their workers more data, their workforce more data. And just handing more data to your employees has not been working out. 48% of your employees are making gut decisions frequently, as opposed to incorporating data in them. And the numbers are even worse at the C-suite. 2/3 of the executive suite are making decisions based on their gut instead of basing it on data. This is a challenge that all of us have to work through, but most specifically organizational leadership. The idea here of encountering data as a, oh my gosh, I must do this kind of situation. 36% said they would find an alternate way. Now, I'm not sure what that is, but they're going to be creative about it nevertheless. And 14% said they would avoid the task entirely. Well, again, these are bad numbers. We don't want 15% of our workforce not doing specific tasks because they don't feel comfortable working with data. In fact, the discomfort is so great. A couple more measurements here. 14% of people in general surveyed feel that they could meet that definition that I started the session with there a little while ago. 14%. 21% of those classified in the age range of 16 to 24 said they're better. So they're a little better than us, but they're not very good overall. And this does lead us to sort of an onboarding cliff where we're going to have future employees clearly unprepared for these data-driven workforces that everybody envisions. But the numbers are worse at business decision makers level. We have a whole series of them here. I'll just pop them up. 24% feel fully confident to read, write, and argue. That is our definition. Oh, I'm so sorry. I went back. There we go. There we go. Let's get it again. I got that one. Got that one. There we go. All right, 24% of them feel fully confident or meet our definition of Wikipedia's definition of data literate. So there's 1 in 4. 1 in 3 say they're able to create measurable value from that, and I like that. That's interesting that it's actually higher than the other. 27% say my projects produce actionable insights, so that's less than 3 in 10, and almost 80% of them would invest their own time and energy into improving data skill sets around that. So these are numbers that we should really be paying a lot of attention to and trying to incorporate. And I can see that organizations are looking for data literacy training going forward. Once again, let's be careful of that. There has to be some objectivity into that process. So let's start off with, again, the challenge here is that the average knowledge worker is taught nothing about data, and yet that is the definition of a knowledge worker. 100% of knowledge workers work with data daily. Similarly, we've done a relatively poor job of teaching IT professionals anything about data beyond building a brand new database. And the problem with that is that it also trains management to believe that I only need this data skill when I'm developing a new database in the process. And that's a very unfortunate use of this. I've seen organizations literally say, well, no, I'm just merging two databases. I'm not creating a new one, so I don't need anybody from the data group to speak to this. It's obviously not a surprise to you then that 40% or so, sorry, 46% of companies report they've made bad decisions around that. Let's just take a quick look at how that perhaps works. Bad decisions are made by decision makers in the business and the technical community. Those bad decisions result in poor treatment of organizational data assets and poor quality data, which results in poor organizational outcomes. And we want to be careful and not get too much into
This is wrong.
The rinse and repeat stage. And almost interrupted Morgan Freeman there. Thank you, Morgan Freeman, for lending your voice to this rather strange lecture on data here that we're doing. But yes, it is wrong. We don't want people to continue to do this, and we want to have better results in order to do this. One of the most interesting ways that I've seen happen to organizations over and over again within the pandemic situation is that they're installing a very fine package called Salesforce.com. And Salesforce is really very good software. But if you take the software and install it, and that your goal is having the software installed and live on time, as opposed to the software is installed and live on time after the data's been improved or checked for quality or whatever you want to think of it as, you'll find very quickly that the customer, whether it's your internal customer or your external customer, is unable to distinguish between Salesforce having bad data in it and working perfectly and Salesforce sucking, right? Salesforce is terrible. Salesforce is useless. It's no good. It doesn't work. These are all incorrect, but this is the perception that they get when this happens. And I have dozens of instances of it happening within just the last 3 years in order to look at this. This is the idea that organizations need to address this data debt that I briefly alluded to earlier to get us back to zero so that we at least have a good foundation that we can build on by undoing reverse engineering existing stuff. And you may or may not have those skills in your organization, but you can develop them relatively easy, because if you don't, the data debt is going to continue to slow your progress, to decrease the quality of your output, to increase the cost and provide greater risk than if you decrease the data debt in order to do that. I don't, again, have time to get into it here, but there is a paper that you can download to read more about it. So this is what I see for our 21st century citizenry. We have a challenge in front of us, and that we need to move forward in a very assertive fashion. So I'm not going to take you through the whole framework, but just the first three levels up to knowledge worker in this little subsection here. So first thing, when I looked at the efforts that were being done in data literacy, I found there was a bit of a challenge, because while having an argument about whether you should have 3 years of statistics or 2 years of statistics to become a data scientist just is a good discussion, it doesn't matter in the long run here. And the discussions, the work, the results have not been material, and therefore are inessential in this context. And we need to find out instead what does matter, what types of things are material, what are essential. And part of the reason for that is because data is not broadly or widely understood. Again, like an elephant that I alluded to earlier, depending on what part of it you encounter, and if you are visually impaired, you will think of it differently until you get to another part and try to integrate those findings with your previous findings. Well, data is the same way. people come to it through different paths and think data is about different aspects. And there is no broadly or widely understood definition here. So what we need to do is to focus where we can get some leverage here. And this is including on up through the data categories, as you'll see in a minute. Now let's just start out. I made this slide a little while ago. My understanding is we've blown through 8 billion people, or will do so this fall, so perhaps between now and when the conference is. Of those 8 billion people, 2.5 billion have a mobile device connected to the internet, one of these rectangles, as we call them. If you are connected to the internet and you are an adult, that gives you a 1.5 billion category in there. And of those, there are 1 billion knowledge workers worldwide. That is the audience I think that we need to focus upon. I love incorporating Abraham Maslow's work into the work of data because I think it corresponds very well. Maslow discovered that in the human needs category, if you had food, clothing, and shelter needs, you could never be safe. If you were not safe, you could not belong to something that is larger than yourself. If you can't belong to something larger than yourself, you're going to have real problems with self-esteem, be unable to distinguish yourself from everybody else. And until you get to self-esteem, it's very difficult to get to self-actualization. In fact, according to Maslow, it's impossible. Each of these are necessary but insufficient conditions. And in our data literacy framework, then, the idea here is that we'll start with the mobile literate. We call these mobile data spreaders. If you do not understand it, you are taking data and spreading it throughout the world and giving it to people. And more importantly, perhaps just draining your batteries unnecessarily fast. Mobile data spreaders, adult data spreaders, knowledge workers. We put in a couple of other levels for teachers and data professionals. And the key to this is that we need to level up with all data professionals as well as cyber professionals, just by the way, because this helps have us ground us in the same terminology. We're not on the same levels at this point, and we need to get there. That said, we can't control this level of society. They are below the threshold. This is a societal constraint, but not a legal constraint for us. But we can control the top 3 levels, and the top 3 levels can be governed by codes of conduct and by employment agreements. So we do have the ability to get some leverage over these 5 levels of data literacy. Here they are labeled in a different way, but you can see the same 5 levels: mobile, adult, and again, we can't control these. What we do, though, understand is that from an ethical and a behavioral perspective, the mobile and adult data spreaders want to avoid being fooled or manipulated. They're in a basically defensive posture. And their behavioral focus correctly is on them as an individual. But as I mentioned before, knowledge workers and above are absolutely able to be incorporated by statute, by allegiance to their organization, to their professional association, to society, to take on a vow to avoid fooling or manipulating. By the way, that doesn't mean that an evil organization can't say your duty is to sell this stuff, to, in fact, fool and manipulate. And we certainly know that does occur out there. Similarly, behavior can be forced to be focused on the organization as a result of this as well. Now, why is this important? Well, I'm pretty sure that your average knowledge worker does not understand what a log file is, which is the idea that everything, of course, you do on a computer is logged. And what do I mean by a computer? The rectangular device. Yes, exactly. We're right on sync here. So here I have a rectangular device, and perhaps I'm driving in real life, and I lift the device logs that the device has been lifted by a person, and I manually enter a phone number, which it logs correctly. Then I notice that I've been talking on my phone next to a police car, and I hang it up. That's not a good thing to do, so I'm making up a story here. The car app notes my parking spot. Thank you, Lou. Very helpful, where I pull over for have the conversation with the policeman, and maybe I start recording the conversation. I'm not paranoid, so I don't typically feel that I need to do that, but it is certainly a thing to do in today's environment. Now, the problem is you're going to have your word against the police officers in whether you broke the law by having your device up to your ear while you were driving in violation of the law, given that particular set of circumstances. Wouldn't it be great for young people to understand that the same thing occurs and does occur all the time, and that if instead you use the voice commands, it actually makes a difference around there in terms of where you go. So these type of knowledge are missing from large chunks of society, and they go to an education that we need to provide for them in data literacy for knowledge workers. Here's another one. Again, I'm not accusing Tom Brady of being a knowledge worker. He's clearly a smart individual and smart business person, but he really did not understand that destroying his cell phone would not destroy the actual texts themselves. Perhaps we're in the middle of finding our Secret Service texts from January 6th. It'll be interesting to see whether they are recoverable or not around this. Just from a societal perspective, Mickey, there's this idea that you start need to pay attention to digital or social reputation, what's going on in there, who you are, who you say you are, and who people say you are. These all blend together in our digital reality that we have to pay more attention to as time goes by in this. This leads us to a series of hidden data factors that we really have to watch out for. There is data that goes from work that goes from Department A to Department B, and Department B makes corrections because it's easier than sending it back to Department A, which happens again and again. Here in just this one little brief example, I've given you 3 data factories that are hidden that we don't know about. And where do these go? Well, these go throughout our organization. We just don't know where they are and how much they cost us. It's unnecessary bleeding from a number of unnecessary cuts in this case. And data challenges manifest themselves in many different ways, typically through some sort of series of IT or business processes that allow us to see these, but more importantly, treat them individually, because each of these around the corners here look unique. And while that's interesting, we won't understand that they have common data challenges until we literally connect the results. Excuse me, connect the dots. So to obtain the right kinds of results, what we need to do is employ a specialized team that works on this for full time, so that they're not at all, having their time divided or off the side of their desk, that they understand this as a profession and get better at it and codify, because we're at the beginnings of all of this, and we need things to be done to get us where we're going to go, particularly around the area of body of knowledge and things that we've done with the DIMBOK all the way around here. Let me give you another example. As a knowledge worker, we would like you to understand a little bit about what it is to be a steward of data, to be managing data on behalf of an organization or another individual, that you have a duty to demonstrate value, that you are able to show more about what's going on, that there is a clear track in there, that you're current on your methods and your data, of course, that you understand whether you're involved in a fiduciary responsibility around that, and that we're all swimming, if you will, in the same swimming pool. Lack of understanding of these concepts is going to hurt us, and as a knowledge worker, you'll benefit much more. The goal of all knowledge worker productivity is to remove some click from someplace somewhere, and then tally those clicks and cost them out. And this is a fairly straightforward way of understanding and achieving value in this type of a situation here. Another component that comes in very importantly is data ethics. And the ethics really comes down to a statement that everybody repeats, and I think is a good one: should I thinking must replace can I thinking. Uh, Now, remember, our knowledge workers are the first level that are capable of being bound by behaviors. The organization can impose it, the trade association, wherever the allegiance is. But it can go to that organization, and you can count on that type of behavior. That we don't have that as an option at the moment. I'll tell you, my students are amazed after I watch Coded Bias with them. They come, do you think my boss understands what's going on with this? They're just amazed as they see this happen. Well, this is where our knowledge workers are our first round of defense, and can replace this can I with should I, and look at things from an architecturally significant perspective. Again, if you're not aware of these, there are resources out there that you can look at and just use these as checklists in terms of what you're looking at from an ethics perspective, and your kinds of thought that you're doing. all of this is in preparation, of course, for going digital, which is what everybody really wants to do. They're not sure why, and I'm going to repeat a wonderful thing that my colleague Mark Johnson gave to us a little while ago. He said it's actually doodling on a Zoom chat, which shows that we could get together over the plague, the um, epidemic, and have ideas. He said, "Look at this. What do you get if you subtract data from digital?" I said, "I'm not sure what you've got, but I know if I do it the other way around, I'm always going to have the data there, and that's kind of important because most organizations haven't realized that you can't just go digital without at the same time getting, or prior to that, in fact, not at the same time, by just spelling data. You've got more work to do, and it requires more work than just simply spelling data and giving it lip service. I'll give you a recent example here. I saw this on LinkedIn. Somebody's typing, I've just had this recent technology innovation. I'm thinking, okay, see what they've got. Well, they've got chocolate ice cream going into anything awesome, and having chocolate ice cream out. And they go, wow, you know what? That's true with blockchain, and it's true with blockchain. And that was, of course, their insight on this. And the sad part is that this was a recent realization for them. This should be basics that we're teaching everybody: garbage in, garbage out. If we don't understand that garbage data through any kind of perfect model is going to produce garbage digital results, around the idea that we're running it through a warehouse or machine learning algorithm, BI, blockchain, AI, master data management, data governance, analytics, it doesn't matter because garbage in is still going to be garbage digital results on the way out. Not understanding this is the main cause of what's going on. Organizations are not cognizant of the fact that they're shipping the same data back and forth where they don't need to. And just in data transfers can be huge, huge savings organizationally on that. When you harmonize and regularize these and get them to the place, there's massive amounts of savings because organizations aren't organized and don't have this managed as an asset. Of course, we want the quality data to go in because only now does it make sense to evaluate the outputs. And yet we don't have these measure programs in place. In fact, I'm going to talk a minute here about machine learning, which is the idea that we've tried to get better in machine learning, and our algorithms are doing great, but we have run into a conundrum where machine learning algorithms require training data that we don't have access to now. It turns out our data management community has access to some of the best training data that exists out there, and it's a marvelous source. So we should be of much more value to the AI machine learning community at this point, and I'm just puzzled why we're not. We'll try some outreaches certainly as we go forward. Well, so we've looked at this smaller part. Let's look now at the workforce performance around this. And just a slide from Doug Laney, who did some great research around here, just finding out that the more data-oriented a company it was, more valuable the organization was, all the way around, direct correlation in terms of that. What are the challenges around all of this? Well, workforces resist anything new. There's a dearth of champions. If we grow some more, we'll do better. We've got new governance and data in our organizations that need to be incorporated, but we don't want to continually do that. A lot of organizational insecurity, silos, of course, that need to be stamped out. And finally, realizing the idea that 80% of our data challenges require people and processes as opposed to technology-only solutions. In the process of doing this, somewhat in tongue-in-cheek, but put together with Todd a 12-step program here. And the idea is that, first of all, if you're not familiar with a 12-step program, when people have trouble with drugs and alcohol in our country, we do not have proven solutions for this. It's a terrible problem. The one that is most effective is called a 12-step program, and it solves 1 in 3, and that's great. I know many people, in fact, when I talk to executives around the table, many of them have also had first or second-hand experience with a family member or a friend who has had a drug or alcohol problem, and a 12-step program may be helping them in that context. So a little tongue-in-cheek, but a little love in that general direction as well. The idea is that this is a people and process challenge, again, as opposed to a technology challenge. And that's what we need to focus on from the literacy perspective as well. Again, not the focus here, but we're going to talk a little bit about the theory of constraints, which is the way to think about data strategy. And if you aren't familiar with theory of constraints. It views systems as limited by one or more constraints, and if you eliminate those constraints, then things will go faster, better, cheaper, with less risk. And everything is blocked by at least something, so find it, fix it, and move on. This is the idea that the chain is no stronger than its weakest link, so let's make the weakest link stronger and continue to build in that type of a context. It follows a plan, do, check, act type of concept, which is good. So what's going on with all of this? Well, organizations have challenges figuring out why they want to do more with their data. They understand that they want to improve their data because data points to where valuable things are. It has intrinsic value of itself, and it has wonderful combinatorial value around this. But we also have to improve the way our people use our data, because we use data to measure, manage, and motivate change. And only when we first taken our data and our people and made them better can we do what everybody wants to do, which is achieve that sustained competitive advantage. And I'm going to give you an example with Rolls-Royce right now, which is a wonderful little example. Now, this is Rolls-Royce used to produce, still does, of course, produce wonderful jet engines, extremely reliable. Nothing anybody wants to poo-poo at. The old model of using that engine was I sell a big thing to an airline from Rolls-Royce's perspective. And that was a thing and a product-driven strategy. The new model, they changed, particularly from a strategic perspective, motivated by the idea that they wanted to have conversations with the business partners. The business partners would take the things that they sold them and say thank you, and we don't need to talk. Well, there were lots of things Rolls-Royce wanted to do, and so they changed so that they were sitting on the same side of the table as their customer. They only made money when their jet engines were making money for the airlines, which they called power by the hour. And then they could start these conversations, which were around NASCAR or Formula One types of activities. Let me just give you an example here, is the way the Indianapolis 500, and they used to change tires back in the day.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
Okay, our measures are 2 tires changed in 67 seconds. New measure, 4 tires, 4 seconds. Now that's the kind of thing management pays attention to. And their process around this was called wing to wing. And what I want you to think about for just a minute is that this business model was invented by Rolls-Royce in a data-centric fashion in 1962. Brilliant, hats off, wonderful case study, and lots of things around that. One of the more important findings was that it wasn't just that they were able to save money on the engines by getting more data, but that by incorporating larger sensors, they were able to eliminate costs of storage, handling, opportunities, and their total is over $1.5 billion at this point in order to provide demonstrated savings around the topic here. Another really wonderful organization that we've worked with over the years is a sort of a partner helping out communities that need food, have food needs around this. And they're really good at what you'd hope they would be, which is delivering food rapidly to people that need it. But they quite cleverly asked the question, what else could be done with our data? And after some consultation, we stumbled on the idea that most bus routes are done because they're easy to understand, but that's usually because they're tied to streets. If bus routes were routed more around certain types of activities, it was possible in many cities to reroute the buses in a way that eliminated food deserts for thousands and thousands of residents. So a wonderful way of taking what we call the sandwich data and bringing it to city council, and they change bus routes because of sandwiches. Just a wonderful story around that. Another story that I was involved with, again, providing the right literacy components here. This organization was obviously the U.S. military, and I happened to be working in proximity at that point in time, and our group caught the activity, and we're having to do data maps. Now, again, the idea here is, I'm sorry, I went too fast. The idea here is that the more soldiers, and it's unfortunately still true today, that more soldiers are dying of their own hand than they are from bad guys. which speaks to our expertise, but also our need to provide care for them. And President Obama made it a priority, and we were involved in the development of the first data collections around this, the first database, in order to do this, and doing things like mapping the data back and forth. You can see it was a kind of interesting work, but it quickly devolved into something that required a 30 by 30 matrix in order to come up with. Now, I had a room here. I'll show you this room. That's my Council of Kernels. And we had this up on the screen, and Colonel X would raise their hand and say, "Sir, I'm row 14. Please put a U in column 7 and an R, I'm sorry, yeah, U in column 7 and an R in column 17," as we were filling this thing out overall. And again, just imagine us trying to all work off of the same sheet of paper because we needed to come to a common understanding. And I had one favor I was able to ask of a colleague who brought in a senior official from the Army to my room full of stewards and said, "Listen, folks, we're going to make this all about my data. So I know that you all are talking about this as individually belonging to each of you, and that's why we have the rows in order to do this. But anybody wants to tell me why I can't use my data to save my soldiers' lives, please come and see me." It was a wonderful example, and more importantly, he told me this story. He said, "Please also," because I said, "Can I write that down?" And he said, "Absolutely." And he said, please tell others. I think it's the right thing to do. I may get fired because of it, but it's still the right thing to do." That said, I've told this story to more than 100 corporate management, and not a single one of them has taken that courageous step. And it's something I think we need to work on as a society around all of these ideas here. Let's take another example. This is an unfortunate example, our January 6th challenge that we had here in this country, and I'm minimizing the challenge. It was an attack on democracy, and something that we absolutely need to pay attention to. Some of the data aspects of this story are fascinating, however. There was a group called Parler. Parler is Facebook for the people that wanted to riot at the Capitol. Don't ask why, it's just that way. And it was built on a very bad platform, and it turned out that it leaked shortly after January 6th. So the world had access to this data, and these are all at these various links that I put for you in the excuse me, the handouts. There we go. I was looking for the right word. The slide handouts. You can click on that and see this. And the question was, well, this is a Parler user uploading a photograph from approximately this location based on the GPS, and you can see some were inside and some were close by, but there were clearly a lot of people. It was not Parler. It was definitely Parler in this. And they took the data analysis even further because of the wide variety of data that was out there. They started color coding it as to whether it was audio, video, or both, or otherwise interesting of some sort, and time and date stamping it and geocoding it as well, so that you can now go to this location here and click on any of these features and see what was going on from that perspective. And a group called ProPublica put this together. You can go in 3 different phases, looking around DC, near the Capitol, inside the Capitol, and follow a timeline here and look at the 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and see what videos were on. And as you can imagine, law enforcement use this. Here's another final piece of data around all of this. And again, a sad event, but at least an interesting data perspective. Here's a group of people who are watching the rally at one point in time, and then they clearly moved to the Capitol. Again, not too hard to follow that from a point of fact perspective. I should note this is illegally obtained data according to the Washington Post, but they of course went ahead and published the analysis of the data along the way. And this of course has resulted in our judicial system processing in the federal court around the district around this crime more than 3 times the number of cases that they normally publish in their largest criminal investigation in our history in order to look at this. So what have we done for the last hour? Well, talked about what it is you need to have as a citizen, and that if we don't get this foundational piece of this right, our children, our citizens, our knowledge workers, everybody ends up with a different perspective of data, and we need to understand from a unified perspective. We've defined literacy around this, but not as a binary concept of a 5-level set of concepts. What defines success? Well, I think objectively providing some characteristics and starting work. While I said several times we can't force anything down at level 1 or level 2, we can encourage it society-wide. And perhaps some of your countries are more forthcoming than ours, or more forward-looking than ours, and can actually legislate this. I've told that several companies are considering, certain countries are considering it. Finally, that knowledge workers and data debt are an important component of all of this, and that is really, if we're going to make a difference in society, that we need to focus our efforts, as opposed to describing how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. I've told you a little bit about the framework. You can see it's mobile, adult, knowledge workers, very important, and then two others that we didn't talk about, but they're obviously in the book around that. And then in terms of improving workforce, it's important to understand the barriers that are involved in this process, and to be able to understand that you need a regular, repeatable process that you can improve, so that you're able to get better at the process of helping data better support the organizational strategy in there, which means we need a specific large focus of data literacy in organizations. Quantifying those benefits is not impossible to do. I've been told for years and years that you can't put a price on data quality. I admit fully that I'm probably not putting the right price on it, but if it's $1 billion, that's enough to make most people pay attention to all of this. So there's a set of special books prices out there if anybody's interested on that. My publisher would be mad at me if I didn't at least bring that to your attention. And I want to say again, thank you so much for inviting me to this, and participating in the event. And I wish you a successful rest of the event, and hope that everything goes well, and that I will see you very soon in the near future.